Everybody, good afternoon and welcome to our weekly media briefing and public health update with Montgomery County Executive Mark Elridge. I'm Lorna Vigilla, Hispanic Public Information Officer, and joining us today is Mr. Sean O'Donnell, Program Administrator, Public Health, Emergency and Preparedness and Response for the Department of Health and Human Services, as well as Dr. Earl Stoddard, who's Assistant Chief Administrative Officer. Members of the media, remember to use the chat during the Q&A portion of this presentation. And with that, I toss it to you, Mr. County Executive. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for joining me again. Sorry I missed you last week, but I was in Taiwan on a 12-hour time difference. So I'm sure you didn't want to do a press conference at like midnight. So back here again, and we led an economic mission to Taiwan. I was invited over to speak at a climate change conference, and I did, but I thought it was an opportunity to bring along folks in the business community and from our Economic Development Corporation to explore opportunities with businesses there in Taiwan, and we did that. And you'll hear more about it next week. We're going to be bringing some of the members of the trip as part of our press conference next week. But it was I think, a really fruitful and useful trip for us. I want to acknowledge that this is now the start of Passover, which begins tonight at sundown. Last night, we recognized Ramadan with a proclamation here at the County Executive Building, and Sunday is Easter. And this week, we begin National Public Health Week after the last 3 years where the pandemic has been at the forefront of our minds. I think we all gained a new appreciation for the importance of public health and professionals that keep us healthy and safe. I want to take this opportunity to thank public health workers across Montgomery County who've continued to work tirelessly and serve our health and wellness. I especially want to note that these were people who, at the height of COVID, when we didn't have treatments, and I will say bluntly, in the beginning, when we didn't even have basic things like adequate masks, they went about and did their jobs and did everything they could to keep people safe. And whether it's our own public health workers or the doctors and nurses in the hospitals that serve our people, people were willing to put themselves at great risk in order to keep our community safe. And I hope we all appreciate that. Beyond COVID-19, our public health people work on a range of issues. They focus on community threats, community issues like mental health, accessibility to healthcare, food and nutrition issues, and reproductive and sexual health. Public health workers play a significant role in this county, and they do it because they care deeply about the people they serve. So I hope you'll join me in acknowledging the work done by our public health workers to improve our overall quality of life in Montgomery County. They really are unsung heroes, and every chance I get to remind people of what they did during COVID, I think it's important to do that. Moving on to the budget, I want to address some of the opposition that I've seen in response to my FY24 operating budget request. I've seen some petitions urging the council to reject the budget as introduced and reject the proposed property tax increase. To be clear, without this funding, the council would have to find over $200 million in cuts to our schools and other vital services in the county. This challenge was not a typical budget challenge. Had we only had to maintain the maintenance of effort requirement, we wouldn't be talking about this increase. This was an unprecedented request. It was 3 times larger than any increase we'd ever given before. It was multiples of maintenance of effort. And as I said repeatedly, I wouldn't have supported fully funding this request for $300 million if it was going to fund programs or special activities. I'm only supporting it because this funding is about our children and their success. And at the core of it, it's about the need to recruit and retain educational professionals. More than 2/3 of this additional money is that would fund MCPS will go to investing dollars that will pay teachers, aides, and school staff and other people essential to ensuring kids get an excellent education. We're no longer the place where educators want to come, and that hurts our children and it hurts the county. For too long, we've shortchanged students by not funding students at the same per pupil rate that our peers have. We're no longer the school district that funds at the highest rate per pupil. We're now funding schools at a lower per pupil rate than we did 12 years ago when the school budget got reset during the Great Recession. And the needs in schools have only increased. And we all know the impact that COVID had on learning. COVID ended, but its consequences on the well-being of our children have endured, and they can't be ignored. We've lost teaching staff, support staff, and we find ourselves behind and uncompetitive with surrounding jurisdictions. That's not the situation that Montgomery County used to be in, but it's the situation that we're in now. Over the last year, more than 1,100 teachers left MCPS and hundreds of positions remain unfilled. Teachers are leaving the classroom for better pay, less demanding, and frankly, more respected work. The impact is larger classes and fewer people to meet the needs of students. The teachers in schools are burning out as they work to cover vacant positions and the increased needs of the children. And the risk of teacher burnout rises with each unfilled job. This is a choice to pay our teachers and other education employees what they deserve to be paid. This is a choice to invest in our education system to ensure long-term attractiveness of the county. And it's a choice to invest in long-term workforce development and economic development. We shouldn't forget that our school system is one of the keys we have in terms of economic development in this county. It's one of the major things that makes us attractive. Slipping in these categories is going to hurt county property values far more and far longer than a 10-cent property tax increase is going to do. Tax increases are never comfortable, and I'm not wedded to a 10-cent increase. But what I am wedded to is that we need to invest in our future and our needs and our priorities. We're watching a similar fight in Washington, D.C., where President Biden has challenged Speaker McCarthy to show a budget proposal to no avail. I believe the council is working in good faith on funding these critical needs. To those who choose to throw bombs from the sideline, I challenge them to show the residents of the county what cuts they're proposing to critical services such as teacher salaries, healthcare, public safety, or other needs to resolve this budget. There is no easy solution. Like I said, to take $250 million out of our budget to make room for this spending in the school system would be an impossible task unless you're willing to do great harm to the public services in Montgomery County. We can nickel and dime and have discussions about small things around the edges. None of us would get us to the level that we need to get to in order to fund this budget. People have raised the issue of accountability in the school system, and it's a concern that's widely shared. I know from talking to other county executives that there's a desire to provide more oversight and engagement to county governments who are responsible for actually funding our schools, but play little or no role in actually development of school budgets. And I know this is shared by council members as well. And next year, we hope to propose changes to state law that'll improve this situation. And I know, again, from my conversations in Annapolis, that this concern was shared by both Democrats and Republican county executives who, on the one hand, agreed we needed to make additional investments in schools, but all shared concerns about accountability. And so this is going to be an ongoing discussion. That said, at the end of the day, this is really about teacher pay and our ability to attract and retain staff. And on this count, there's no doubt that we have a problem. This problem needs to be fixed sooner rather than later. I continue to urge all residents to support the budget as introduced, in that it helps the county hire and retain the staff we need to educate our children and to fund critical needs of the county. On a different tax note, Montgomery County homeowners will want to pay attention to a deadline that's quickly approaching. If not, a new state law could cost you nearly $700 a year. For the past several years, Montgomery County homeowners, as well as homeowners throughout the state, have been able to take advantage of the county income tax offset credit. It's called ITOC, for a tax break on their primary residences. Many of you will notice, if you look at your tax bill, there's a $692 credit on the tax bill, and that's this tax credit. This year, however, for the first time, that tax credit will not be applied automatically. According to a new state law, anyone receiving the credit must register for the Maryland Homestead Tax Credit with the state's Department of Assessments and Taxation before May 1st in order to earn the income tax credit. You have to register, and you have to be the occupant of the home that you're registering. You cannot rent it, you cannot register a rental property for this tax credit. It is only for owner-occupied housing. Our county has sent out more than 80,000 postcards to taxpayers who have taken advantage of this tax credit in the past and may not be aware of the need to take this extra step of registering with the state starting this year. So these postcards spell out how not registering with the state this year is going to impact family budgets. If homeowners don't register with the state by next month's deadline, the $692 they received in the past is going to be billed on their July 2023 property tax bill. And they will also fail to receive credit until they register. So please, those of you in the reporting world out there, let people know the importance of getting themselves registered. Montgomery County Department of Finance indicated that tens of thousands of homeowners do not currently have a state homestead application on file and are at risk of losing this credit and being charged for last year's credit. Please urge your audience to visit the Maryland State Department of Assessments and Taxation website, look for homestead application status, and let them know they'll need their real property account number and access number to register and take advantage of Montgomery County's income tax offset credit. Moving on. Yesterday, I informed our community that Montgomery County Fire and Rescue Chief Scott Goldstein will be leaving us this summer. His last official day is June 30th, 2023. Chief Goldstein first started serving Montgomery County in 1987 as a volunteer with the Kensington Volunteer Fire Department. 3 years later, he was hired in Montgomery County Fire and Rescue Services, and 8 years ago, he became our fire chief. I want to thank him for his service to our county and his dedication to the men and women of Montgomery County Fire and Rescue Services. His absence is going to leave big boots to fill, but I wish him the best in moving forward to his new chief's position in Kelso, Washington. The chief had been in what we call the drop program, so we knew he was going to retire, so this does not come as a surprise. He wanted to be closer to family in Washington State, and finding a position in Kelso, Washington lets him achieve that goal. So I want to thank him for all the service and for his really dedicated service to all the residents of Montgomery County. Back on the health spectrum, the pattern of COVID-19 infections impacting Montgomery County has been pretty easy to spot for a while now. We look for new variants that break out. We watch these case counts and hospitalizations go up until the wave breaks, and that's been the pattern. Right now, cases have receded so much that it seems like even the threat of an outbreak is a long way off. We thought the same thing going into last summer and then saw cases rise right around Memorial Day. I bring this up to remind everyone to remain vigilant and to assure you that we're actually tracking the virus, not just in Montgomery County, but also globally, because the pattern has been that the virus springs up on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, makes its way to Northern Europe, and makes its way to the United States. So we look for patterns over there as a harbinger of what might be coming here. But right now, things look pretty good. Bivalent boosters have been available since September and should be taken by everyone to stay up to date on vaccine protection. There's no doubt that our high level of vaccinations has minimized the number of cases that people experience. But like all of these vaccines, they do wear off in effectiveness after a while, and staying boosted is important. Soon, federal funding for COVID-related expenses like vaccines and testings is going to expire. Many of these protections will come out of family budgets. The county's budget's going to provide some money for retaining some of these services, but we're not at the level that we were during the height of COVID. 2 months ago, the state recorded the 7-day average of more than 9,400 COVID tests a day being taken. Now that number is down to 3,100 COVID tests being recorded every day. That's a good sign that transmission for the disease is far lower than it was in February. But also a reminder, we shouldn't let our guard down. And even as a fewer of our friends or neighbors are getting sick, the possibility remains. And we'll continue to keep you all up to date on how the virus is moving, and hopefully more likely about how it's not moving. I'm going to stop talking now and turn it over to Sean.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. And again, thank you for your kind words to all our public health colleagues, and by extension, all those partners throughout the county who have supported public health throughout COVID and in the other initiatives that we've been facing. It really is nice to have such a broad group of folks working together. So the COVID report is as it has been in the past few weeks, fairly short. Again, as we track globally, these are just giving you an idea that there has been really no significant rise across larger areas. Some countries have had some upticks in some COVID activity, but we're not seeing a huge increase across the globe at this time. There is historically been over the last few years since we've had COVID, every 2 to 3 months, we have seen some new variant start to rise up, evade the immunoprotection that we've developed from vaccines and from previous infections. So we continue to monitor these. As we look at what those variants are, where we've seen a small bit of growth has been in the variants called XBB 1.5.1 and XBB 1.9.1. Some of these were, as many variants were reported under the larger XBB category previously. At this point, the CDC's broken them out just so they can monitor them. But with very low overall COVID activities, even when we see them rise as a proportion of the COVID cases, it's not showing a huge increase at this time. But again, we continue to monitor, and we'll let you know if we see a variant of concern that appears. What we've also seen, looking back at the global phenomenon, is in general since we've had the large Omicron spike, each successive variant has had a lower level of serious illness and lethality, and we hope that continues. But again, the mutations are out of our control. But we hope that trend continues, that they become less and less serious illness. Staying up to date again with your boosters is the best way to continue to have that the best level of immunity. Likewise, our scientific colleagues each time there's a new variant, they do test out to make sure that the therapies have effectiveness against them. As we've reported previously, the Evusheld therapy, which helps to provide some immunity to those who are immunocompromised, that has largely been discontinued because the current variants that is not showing effectiveness against those current variants. So we are, again, reminding our immunocompromised individuals to be extra precautious, especially when you see transmission rates go up, or if you happen to be in an area with a high density of people, take those precautions. But we are seeing the most common therapy is Paxlovid, an antiviral that can be prescribed by a lot of pharmacies or by a private physician. These are all showing effectiveness not only for the XBB variants, but the subvariants that we're tracking now. And just one more word on this. There have been recent reports put out by the CDC and by the Journal of American Medical Association showing that not only with relation to infections and hospitalizations, but with relation to long COVID, that both being vaccinated reduces the likelihood of long COVID by about 50%. And then use of Paxlovid reduces the rate of long COVID by about 25%. So again, if you're at a greater risk for serious illness, please be in touch with your healthcare provider or look at one of those test to treat sites that are at a lot of pharmacies where if you test positive, they'll prescribe you Paxlovid right there. Looking at our county hospital visits for respiratory illnesses, they continue to be down across all ages. And our overall hospitalizations, we've mentioned that alternate care site, the hospital in Tacoma Park that was being operated by Adventist, that has officially stood down. There are no more patients there. Overall, our number of COVID patients has remained relatively stable. We've seen some decreases in the serious illness of patients in ICU beds. And again, a lot of these patients may be at the hospital for other reasons and have a co-occurring COVID diagnosis. Our reports currently for the number of deaths with a COVID diagnosis in March, again, continue to show a decline away from that high period in December and January. We hope this will continue to come down. And finally, just reminding folks that the county and its partners, as well as all kinds of providers across the healthcare spectrum, urgent care, pharmacies, are providing access to testing, are providing access to vaccinations. And many of them there's no out-of-pocket costs. If you have insurance that covers it, your insurance will cover it. And if you don't, many of these places, just like the county, will not charge you for that. So just want to remind folks of that. We still have still distributing mass and rapid test kits at our libraries. So if you are symptomatic or have been exposed to someone with a COVID diagnosis, please use a test. Please use a mask and help protect your friends, families, coworkers from getting COVID. Those were all the updates we have right now. And again, I'd like to turn it over to the rest of the team if there's any additional comments.
The only piece of news I want to report is obviously we've talked about our June police class and the recruitment efforts related to it, particularly the bonus. At this point, we've seen over 100 additional applications based on the bonus being offered. And so we are very hopeful that we're going to have a very robust class in June. We'll be using the next month or so to evaluate all those applications, make offers for slots on those classes. We'll know at some point in May where we're at with regard to filling that class. But obviously a 20%, almost 25% increase in applications to date based on the bonus. And specifically, though, that surge is all after the bonus was announced. Is a very helpful surge in applications that we've seen as a result.
Thank you, Dr. Starter. Thank you, gentlemen. Members of the media, we're going to open it up right now for questions and answers. Please use the chat, and we don't have any questions on the chat quite yet, so we'll give it a second or two. Any questions? Oh, there it is. Here's a question from Mariam Shahzad, my MCM. Good afternoon, Mariam.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Yes, I had a question about White's Ferry. So there was an update last week with owners saying that they've run out of options and they're now looking to sell to Montgomery County, hoping that the county can work to get it running again. So, do you know about this new effort, and is this something that the county would do?
That's something we're considering doing. The problem's on the other side of the river. We could own it. Wouldn't change the fact that we don't have a landing spot on the other side of the river until we reach an agreement with the owner over there. I'm frustrated with the way negotiations have gone. And the county on the other side will not, exercise eminent domain to take the property, which is what we had hoped. So whether or not we buy the property will not solve the problem unless we can reach an agreement with the owner of the landing site, which we're going to continue to pursue. And it may be easier for the county to pursue that option with the owner than for the current owner on Montgomery County side to pursue that option with the owner on the other side of the river.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam. We have a couple more questions. Annalisa Gale, I believe you're WTOP, and then Jenny, you'll be next. Good afternoon, Annalisa.
Following up really quickly on Mariam's question as well, how do you think it would take to obtain eminent domain to get White's Ferry up and running again?
The only people who can do that are the Virginia government, and they've been reluctant to do that. I mean, they've, at every conversation I've had, including with the chair of the board over there, that's not something they've been willing to entertain. So it's not clear to me that it's going to be achieved by eminent domain if the jurisdiction itself doesn't want to use it, which leaves us to try to negotiate something.
Got it.
I will say
Go ahead.
I think something can be negotiated. It may not make everybody happy in terms of what it costs, but I do think it's important to open the ferry and figure out a solution.
Got it. And secondly, about the property tax increase that's being proposed, is there an alternative in terms of another way around it if no one agrees to this property tax increase?
Well, the options would come down to, if you assume that no increase was approved at all, then you'd either have to not fund the school budget. You'd say if you don't fund $220 million of the school budget, then there's no tax increase. That means that teacher pay in the county will continue to lag even further behind everybody else, which will probably exacerbate the problems in the schools. If you're not going to do that, I could guess that you could try to figure out where you're going to take $220 million out of the budget. But my guess is that people would leave police, fire, corrections, health and human services, and probably housing untouched, which would leave you to try to squeeze $220 million out of things like libraries, recreation, and maybe transportation. That would be a problematic thing to do. So there aren't a lot of really good options here. I didn't do this lightly. I never planned on doing this. I assumed we get a typical, we have a requirement for maintenance of effort. It would have cost us, maybe $40–50 million. We could have figured out a way how to manage that. This is beyond our ability to manage it in the existing budget, and that's the challenge we face. So I think it's a necessary thing to do. I think there's some other ways we could come about the money. I have some differences in opinion with the council about what some of those options might be. Hopefully we're going to talk and try to negotiate out a solution. I think, it might be possible to achieve the same level of spending and reduce the taxes, but it require the council looking at some things differently than they've looked at them before. And I'm not going to put anybody on the spot for how we do that, but I leave it to us sitting down and talking with each other and seeing what kind of agreement we can get to.
Really quickly, following up on the vacancies, or in terms of the amount of teachers that left, 1,100, you said. Is that the highest in recent years? What's the comparison there?
I think it's the biggest number I've heard. I know, when I was a teacher, and I remember going into this when the number of people, normal retirement was certainly lower than that. And the number of applicants for trying to get a job in Montgomery County was in the many thousands. And so if you were a teacher applying for a job in Montgomery County, the competition was pretty stiff. Those numbers no longer stack up that way. So they've got a lot of people leaving, and you're not getting the same number of applicants. And part of it is, like I said, our pay is not competitive. The county used to be probably the highest paid jurisdictions, or one of the highest paid. It's slipped below some of the neighboring jurisdictions. Our per pupil spending used to be pretty much the highest. Now it's not. And I'll point out that, places like Howard County, which, people say, folks move to, and they move to there because of the schools. If you move to Howard County, the tax rate in Howard County is $1.25. So people aren't moving to Howard County to escape the taxes. There are probably other issues. But, we used to be in a more competitive position, and we're just not there right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Lisa. Next is Ginny Bixby, Local 360. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hi, Mark. You touched on this a bit in your answer to Annalisa, but you had said earlier in the briefing that you're not wedded to the 10-cent number. Do you think that there is a assuming if the council or members of the council push back on that level of increase, do you think that there's like a negotiable number there?
Yeah, look, I think the good news is that the council has not pushed back on the idea that we need to spend the money on the schools. I think everybody agrees that accountability is an issue, but this is clearly about salaries. It's not about the other issues of programming, where I think there is some concern about accountability. So I think there's a recognition this is something we need to do. So if you recognize you need to do something and you don't like one particular way of getting there, hopefully we can talk about some other ways that we can close some of this gap. I don't envision any way to do this without any tax increase, but we could certainly talk about how to do this with less of a tax increase if people are willing to explore some different options. I'll just leave it at that for now.
Would those options mean adjusting funding for certain parts of the budget as they are now?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's more an issue of spending, and some of the spending changes we can make will not actually have budget impacts. But there are issues that the council had opinions on that they didn't want to go to, and we'll have a conversation about maybe this is the time to explore them again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ginny. I do not see any more questions on the chat from members of the media. We'll give you another second if anybody has any other questions. Going once, going twice. All right, I guess we're done for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Stay safe, and we'll see you again next time. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you all.